Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Soul Talk Radio. Today, I wanted to talk about self-acceptance and self-love with Valentine's Day coming up. What brought me to this topic is every time I think about Valentine's Day, especially when I'm single, I don't feel that way anymore, but years ago, it would bring up obviously feelings of loneliness if you didn't have somebody in your life during Valentine's Day. And then I really started thinking about it, and I thought, why do we have to only celebrate romantic love on Valentine's Day? Why can't we use it as a day to celebrate all of the different types of love in our life? There's love of self, love of our pets, love of our friends, love of your children, love of your home, love of your city. All of these things, you can still use that day as a day to celebrate all of those other types of love in your life. And so it brought me to the topic of self-love. And I know that a lot of people struggle with that. I used to struggle with that. And so I want to talk about it today and give you guys some tips and share a little bit of my story about how I started to love myself. And hopefully some of these things will help you along the way. I also want to talk about self-love versus self-acceptance. If we can't quite get to self-love, we can also practice self-acceptance, and we'll talk about that. So years ago, I did not have a good body image. I had very low self-esteem, especially in my early 20s. And quite frankly, I dated partners who didn't treat me very well because of that low self-esteem. And over the past, I'd say 11 years now, I really have worked to heal on so many levels, and including my self-worth, my self-image, my self-acceptance, and my self-love. And one of the things that I did to help with that, some people call it mirror therapy or mirror work. I've heard it referred to both ways. So what I started doing was, I didn't even know this was the name of it when I started doing it, but I know it's become more mainstream now. I would notice that when I would look in the mirror, I would point out everything that I hated. It was like hate on Megan time. The moment I stepped in front of the mirror, I would start dissecting my face. Oh my God, look at my wrinkles, look at my freckles. My hair looks weird. My belly looks weird, just tearing yourself apart when you're in front of the mirror. And when I started to become aware of my thoughts, right? That's where it starts, when we become aware of what we're thinking, including what we're thinking about ourselves. This right here is our own worst enemy at times. It can also be our greatest advocate. It depends on how you choose to shift what you're thinking about, to shift and reframe the things that you're telling yourself on a daily basis, the things that you're telling yourself about your body or just your life in general. So what I started to do was, obviously, when I became aware of those very negative thoughts that I was thinking about my body, I was like, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing this. So you need to start to reframe this. And every time I looked in the mirror, I told myself, you are going to tell yourself, I love you. And you're going to find something on your body that you love, and you're going to focus your attention on that. And it's very vivid, the memory of me being in front of my mirror. I apologize if I start crying. I'm going to try not to. And I had never told myself I love you before. I think that a lot of people have experienced that. And when I stood in front of my mirror and I looked myself in the eyes and I said, I love you, I started crying, started like wailing crying. And there was like a release and a joy and a gratitude that came over me. There's a quote that comes to mind where it says something along the lines of, your body speaking to you, and your body's saying, like, after you've said, I love you, your body says, I've been waiting my whole life for you to tell me that. And I really feel like your body does respond the second you start to say, I love you, and say good things about yourself. And you start to reframe that. It's a crazy, beautiful, wonderful shift. And does it happen overnight? No. We've talked about this before. You have very well ingrained thought patterns, right? And the same thoughts that we were thinking yesterday are the same thoughts we're going to think today. And so if you've been thinking those negative thoughts, let's just take one, for example. I hate my wrinkles. Okay. One thought that I used to have. And your mind is going to repeat that every single time you step in front of that mirror because it's so used to doing it. It's become a well-worn path in the mind. But when you start to reframe that and you start to step in front of the mirror and say, oh, I love my eyes, I love my hair, I love my heart, I love my compassion, all of those things, I love you, I love myself. You're creating new neural pathways in the mind, but it doesn't automatically go there in the beginning, right? It takes work. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to constantly become aware of what you're thinking and then reframe it. And over time, it does become easier. And over time, those new pathways become stronger. This is the best way I can describe it. Those new pathways become stronger than the old pathways were. And so now you look in front of the mirror and I'm more inclined to point out the things that I love now instead of the things that I hate. And that took a while. It took a few years. And I will still sometimes look in the mirror and tell myself I love you and start crying. And that's not a bad thing. It's like a release. It's cathartic. But that is one of the main things that saved me, that brought me out of feelings of unworthiness, feeling not good enough, feeling like my body wasn't good enough, wasn't beautiful enough, wasn't whatever. And I know that we all struggle with that. Mostly women. I know men struggle with it too, but I think that mostly women. If we're being honest, we are kind of programmed to believe that, aren't we? Advertisements our entire lives have been showing us, it's very subtle, but we're aware of it now. But advertisements our whole lives have been showing us this one body, and you need to look like this. And if you don't look like this, there's something wrong with you. You're ugly, you're wrong. There's something wrong with you. And we've been spoon-fed that our entire lives. And it's quite frankly BS. I started thinking one day, if we all ate the same way and exercised the exact same way, all of us would still look different. And that's beautiful. Like the varieties of our bodies, of our skin tone, of our hair color, of our eye color, of our personalities, of our language, everything, that variety is so beautiful. But a lot of times we don't see it like that. And especially we don't see it in ourselves. We look in the mirror and we see something that's different than other people and we start to dislike it. Not necessarily because, not necessarily, not because it's wrong, not because it's bad, but because we've literally been programmed to hate ourselves because of, let's be honest, corporate greed, but we won't get into that today. And they make money when we dislike ourselves, right? So, oh gosh, another quote just came to mind that in that way, because we've been programmed to hate ourselves, self-love is an act of rebellion. And I want to be rebellious. I don't know about you. So try mirror therapy. See if it helps. Mirror work, whatever you want to call it. See if it helps. And another thing that I started to do, and I still do this today, like when I'm practicing my gratitude practice, is I will get a piece of paper and I will write out all of the things that I love about myself. And I'm not just talking about physical attributes. I'm talking about your personality, the person that you are, your kind heart. I love my compassion. I love my humor. I love that I'm able to express myself. I love my intelligence. I love my creativity, writing it all down. And looking at that list when you need to, and recreating that list as many times as you need to, and feeling that love of self, and another thing that's really hard is in our society, obviously being egotistical and full of yourself isn't a good thing. And I get that, But that's so much different than having self-love and having self-worth. So much different. That person who's sitting a little bit too much in the ego and is being a little bit egotistical, or whatever you want to word that, that's coming from a place of fear. A fear of not being good enough, so they're portraying a certain personality to you. Whereas self-love, self-acceptance, it's not a place of fear, it's a place of compassion and love and acceptance of who we are, of what we are, of how we look, of our differences, and loving and embracing that. And another thing I wanted to talk about, and this kind of goes into shadow work. I talk about this in my book, The Shift. It's not published yet. I know you guys were asking about that. When you notice something in another person that you really love, let's say you notice their compassion, their ingenuity, whatever it is, you wouldn't be able to even recognize or see that in another person if it didn't also exist within you. But we have a hard time acknowledging and accepting that. We don't see it within ourselves. We see it in others all the time. You wouldn't be able to notice it in them if it didn't exist within you. And I know some people, when I talk about this subject, they say, I have a really hard time with self-love and loving myself as I am. And so I offer this. What if instead, if you are having a hard time with self-love, what if instead you practice self-acceptance, which is simply just allowing yourself to be without judgment. So those thoughts that we talked about at the beginning, those thoughts that can come up when we stand in front of the mirror, trying to become aware of those things and just letting them go. Just release it. I accept myself. Instead of saying I love you, if you have a hard time with that, I accept myself. Right? Placing our hands on our hearts, I accept myself fully as I am now. And as we talked about in the last episode, if your thoughts are continuing to ruminate over things that you don't love about yourself, doing one of four things: shifting the thought to just another thought, shifting it to a thought that feels good, shifting it to a thought of gratitude, or bringing your attention back to the present moment, right? I feel like I should call that the 4 pillars. And also, it's funny that when you begin to love yourself, you are the flaws that you once saw, that you just tore yourself up about, which aren't flaws at all, but you will begin to embrace and cherish them and cherish your uniqueness. I'm going to share a story. When I was so I'm very fair-skinned, very fair-skinned. I don't know if it shows on the camera. I think that it does a little bit, but it's like my mom's a redhead. It's like I have the skin of a redhead, but without the red hair. And I sunburn very easily. I have a lot of freckles, especially on my shoulders. My face was full of freckles when I was little. They've kind of faded over time. And when I was younger, like in middle school and in high school, I was made fun of that a little bit because I was so fair-skinned. And because of that, in high school especially, I started like using self-tanner because I just thought, I don't want people to even mention it. And so, like I said, I started using self-tanner, and probably in my mid-20s, I was still using it. And I had a moment where I realized to myself during this self-love journey, I thought, why do I have to rub on this freaking orange goo on my body just so that it will be more appealing to other people? I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And that shift of loving my fair skin, of loving and embracing porcelain skin, because my whole life I hated it, loving and embracing myself and the things that I thought were wrong because it didn't look like that picture. It was a journey. But now I look in the mirror and I look at my skin and I look at all my freckles, and it's funny that freckles are now in style. You see like people with filters adding freckles. I think it's funny. It wasn't like that when I was little. But now I love those things. And I look in the mirror and I tell myself how much I love those things. And I embrace that unique quality about myself. Whereas before, simply because everybody else didn't like it, I didn't like it. I thought it was wrong. You know, especially being a millennial, we were like in that time where everybody had to be tan. I feel like we're still kind of in that time, and I wish it would go away. And most women, you know, fake it. They put on fake tan, or they go to the tanning bed, whatever it is, to achieve that. And I just wish we could embrace whatever our natural skin tone looks like more. And so I wanted to also tell you guys about, like, there's other things that we can do to celebrate self-love, right? And take ourselves on solo adventures and embrace ourselves, and like almost in a way date ourselves, especially if we're single, especially coming up with Valentine's Day. And so I actually created this list that I have on my to-do list that repeats itself every week. And it has all of these things on it, all of these things that I can do, like on a solo date with myself or with somebody else if you'd like. But I wanted to read it to you guys, and maybe you'll get some inspiration and take yourself on a little adventure. So I will give the caveat, some of these do cost money. A lot of them are free, but obviously the ones that, like there's one on here, taking a hot air balloon ride. I've never done that. I've always wanted to, but I haven't checked on the prices or anything like that. So one of my ideal solo dates, here we go. Movie in the park, buying yourself flowers, going to get Thai food. I love Thai food. Going to get a good cup of coffee, watching a favorite movie with popcorn, the lights dimmed, and candles, going on a hot air balloon ride, going stargazing, going to get brunch, going to amusement park, going to the zoo, the beach, bowling, going to get a massage, going for a sunset stroll, going for a hike, a road trip, a picnic, going go-karting or ATVing, going to breakfast, having breakfast for dinner, cooking myself breakfast for dinner. Sometimes that's fun. Cooking a new dinner, trying a new recipe, going for a train ride, going to a dance class, having a bonfire, playing video games, brushing my hair. I know that sounds so silly. I think that women with long hair will understand. It's like sometimes when you brush your hair, you can like almost brush your own back at the same time, and it feels really nice. Going to a museum, going to a bookstore, a record store, going ziplining, going on an airboat tour. I've always wanted to do that, never done that. Going camping, going to an antique store, a bike ride, going to an open mic night, redecorating a part of your house, doing a small home project, going to a street fair or a festival, going on a boat ride, going to the spa, the farmer's market, or a brewery, playing pool, going to a comedy show, opera, or play, going to the drive-in movies, and lastly, taking a flight lesson. I've always wanted to do that. So those are just some ideas on my list that maybe can help inspire you to take yourself on a little solo date. When I was writing all of this stuff down to create the podcast episode, that quote came up in my mind. Did you guys ever watch Parks and Recreation? Hopefully you did. When they were like, treat yourself. That came up in my mind. I was like laughing. But it's true. You do need to just treat yourself every now and then. And around Valentine's Day is a perfect time to do that, to celebrate the love of yourself. And you can also create, I got this from a website called theeverygirl.com. I thought it was really lovely. You can create a self-love mantra. I've actually done this. I just never kind of put two and two together that I had done this. But some examples are telling yourself when I'm looking in the mirror, I am enough. I am worthy of love. I am good at all things, and I am unstoppable when I set my mind to something. Those are just some examples that they provided. So again, hopefully learning to practice self-love. But if self-love is not attainable, practicing self-acceptance. And I hope that this episode has been helpful to you. That's all I have for you today. And thank you so much for joining me as always. I'm also a meditation and anxiety coach. If you're interested in booking a session with me, you can go to my website, meganshirey.com. If you like these episodes, please like, share, and subscribe. These episodes are recorded every Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and then they're posted to all major podcasting platforms on Monday morning at 7 a.m. If you love our content, if you have a question or an episode idea, please leave us a review or a comment. And may you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease, sending you infinite love. And until next time.